Let me tell you something strange about self-transformation. We live in a world where change is supposed to be visible, announced, documented, measured in before and after photos, dramatic turning points, bold declarations of becoming someone new. Yet some of the most profound transformations happen quietly, without witnesses, without language, sometimes without even a clear moment where you can say, "This is when it started." And here's the question that lingers beneath the surface. How do you know you're changing if nothing on the outside seems to move? At first glance, transformation is easy to misunderstand. We imagine it as reinvention, as becoming louder, stronger, more confident, more impressive. We assume change should look like progress, like improvement others can recognize. But that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology unfolding. One that has less to do with becoming more, and more to do with becoming aligned, with shedding what no longer fits, with quietly returning to yourself. See, for some people, self-transformation doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with discomfort, a subtle friction between who you are and who you're pretending to be. You still function, you still show up, but something inside you feels slightly misaligned, like a shoe that technically fits but slowly wears you down with every step. You can't always name it. You just know you're tired in a way rest doesn't fix. You see it in small moments. You stop reacting the way you used to. You pause where you once rushed. Certain conversations drain you faster. Certain roles start to feel heavier. From the outside, nothing dramatic has changed, but internally something is loosening its grip. Psychologists have noticed this pattern. Real transformation often begins not with action but with awareness, a moment when you observe yourself without immediately correcting or judging what you see, not trying to fix, just noticing, and that noticing alone begins to rearrange things. In a culture obsessed with optimization, this looks unproductive, because we're taught that change should be forceful, strategic, visible. But here's the reframe. Self-transformation isn't about constructing a better version of yourself. It's about removing the layers that were never you to begin with. It's not about becoming confident. It's about stopping the performance of insecurity. It's not about finding your voice. It's about releasing the fear that taught you to silence it. For many people, this process starts after a kind of emotional exhaustion. After years of adapting, of reading rooms, of becoming what was needed to belong. At some point, the cost becomes noticeable. You realize how much energy it takes to maintain an identity that isn't rooted in truth. There's often a quiet turning point, not dramatic, just honest. When you notice how relieved you feel when you stop explaining yourself. When you let a boundary stand without justification. When you choose rest over proving your worth. And something inside you exhales. Here's what's often misunderstood. People assume self-transformation is about ambition, about wanting more from life. But often, it's about wanting less distortion, less noise between your inner experience and your outer expression. The deeper psychological layer here is something called congruence. The alignment between what you feel, what you think, and how you live. When those parts are disconnected, the nervous system stays on edge. You're constantly adjusting, anticipating, performing. But when alignment begins, the system settles. Not because life becomes easy, but because it becomes honest. And let's be honest, most of what we call personality is adaptation, learned responses, coping strategies that once kept us safe. We mistake them for identity because they've been with us so long. But transformation often asks a frightening question. Who are you without the armor? This is where the paradox appears. Growth is supposed to make you feel stronger. Yet real transformation often makes you feel more vulnerable first. Because you're no longer buffered by familiar patterns, you feel more, you notice more, you can't unsee what you've seen. And not everyone who changes is doing so from peace. Some are driven by fear, by the need to escape pain, by the belief that who they are now is unacceptable. This is the shadow side of transformation. When growth becomes self-rejection in disguise. But there's another path. One where change isn't about leaving yourself behind, but about bringing yourself back online. Where healing doesn't mean becoming unrecognizable, but becoming inhabitable. Because in a world that constantly says upgrade, optimize, improve, choosing integration becomes an act of quiet resistance. Maybe the most profound transformations don't announce themselves. Maybe they happen in how you speak to yourself when no one is listening, in how you respond instead of react, in how you allow rest without guilt. Think about it. When was the last time you noticed you were different without deciding to be? When something that once triggered you simply didn't anymore. What shifted there? This is where self-transformation moves from psychology into philosophy, because at its core, it asks what it means to live authentically, to be seen by yourself before being seen by others, to exist without constantly narrating your existence. The longer someone stays in this process, the more time feels different, less rushed, less segmented into achievements and failures. Life stops feeling like a series of performances and starts feeling like a continuous unfolding. You don't disappear from ambition, you just stop using it as proof of worth. Research supports this quietly. Studies on internal locus of control and emotional regulation show that people who anchor their identity internally experience greater psychological stability. When your sense of self isn't dependent on constant feedback, your nervous system recovers faster. You respond instead of brace. And yet, people undergoing real transformation are often misunderstood. They may seem quieter, less reactive, less eager to explain themselves. From the outside, it can look like withdrawal, but from the inside, it feels like coherence. Their stillness isn't stagnation, it's integration. Maybe that's what real confidence looks like. Not certainty, not loud self-belief, but the ability to stay present with yourself as you change. To let identities dissolve without rushing to replace them. Maybe some transformations are too sacred for announcement, too complex for labels. Maybe growth doesn't always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like subtraction. So the next time you notice yourself changing in ways you can't quite explain, don't rush to define it. Don't demand proof. Maybe you're not losing yourself. Maybe you're finally making room to live inside yourself more honestly. Because self-transformation doesn't mean becoming someone else, and it doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it simply means you're no longer at war with who you are becoming. And maybe, just maybe, the truest change is the one that feels quiet enough to stay.